Welcome to the Making Math Moments That Matter podcast. I'm Kyle Pearce.
And I'm Jon Orr. We are two math teachers who, together,
with you, the community of educators worldwide, want to build and deliver math lessons that spark engagement,
fuel learning,
and ignite teacher action.
Welcome to the first ever episode of Making Math Moments That Matter. Are you ready to do this, Kyle?
I am so ready. I'm ready to dive right in. So, Jon, our friends at home are probably wondering, why are we starting a podcast anyway? What's going on here?
The why behind this podcast is centered on our current journey to make math moments that matter to our students every day. After years of having great lesson one day and a total flop the next, we set out to try and figure out what factors into the success of a great math lesson. We knew that it couldn't come down to luck. We can create these moments for our students. But, Kyle, the big question for us and everybody is, how can we do this?
Yeah, like in this first episode of the podcast, we're hoping to spend some time sharing a bit about ourselves and sort of why we decided to do this podcast. This has actually been on our to-do list for a number of years now. And basically what we're going to do is share out this thing we call the Making Math Moments That Matter 3-part framework that we've created. And really, we created it to help ourselves increase our chances of making these memorable math moments every single day for our own students. And we're hoping it'll help some others that are listening from home.
Yeah, I'm pretty pumped to dive into all that. But, in the next 3 episodes, we're going to unpack each of these individual parts of the framework to hopefully give you an understanding of how these pieces can be put together to make awesome lessons that students, they don't want it to end.
That's so awesome. Well, before we go any further, though, Jon, I think we should take a couple minutes to introduce ourselves. So why don't you go ahead first? Tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're from, what's your position, and sort of, tell us a little bit about your family.
So yeah, Kyle, I live in Tilbury, Ontario, Canada. It's a tiny town right on the 401 by Windsor, pretty close to you. We live pretty close together, as you know, but everyone listening here, doesn't probably know that. I am a high school math teacher. I teach, 3 classes a day. We're semestered. I have right now a senior level math class. I have 2 applied level math classes. And for those of you not in Ontario, applied level math classes are high school students in grades 9 and 10 who, traditionally have been told year after year in elementary school that they're probably not awesome at math. They're not like at these high academic achieving levels. Those are my classes that I have right this semester. My family, I live with 3 wonderful kids, Jules, Lucy, and Olivia. I have twins. They're 8 right now, and the older one is 10 years old, and my wonderful wife, Scarlett. And when I think about my teaching, is that in my history of teaching, is that I was a very typical high school math teacher. I was the teacher that you probably had in high school for a long time. I taught and modeled my teaching after all of my high school teachers. I was the teacher that probably got mad at you for not doing your homework every single night. I was the teacher that had, every 2 weeks was a test, no matter what. I was the teacher that, probably stood at the front, gave all the examples every single day. And then
you're saying probably, Jon, but let's be honest here. Is it a probably or was it a for sure?
No, like I did all these things for sure. I guess I'm not sure is why I'm saying probably, but after I was, when I first started teaching, like many early teachers, they're probably told, you got to put in your dues. Like that was a phrase that, I remember being told early on. I'm pretty sure you had that same phrase told to you when you first started teaching. What do you think about that?
Yeah, no, totally. And it resonates. Your story resonates. And I think that's sort of how we sort of connected along the way is, everything you said, I'm just picturing myself. I wasn't picturing you, being upset about that incomplete homework or standing up at the front and doing all of the talking and really all of the thinking for my students. I'm now a K through 12 math consultant, pretty fresh out of the classroom, coming out of the secondary panel. However, I've spent these last couple of years really focusing from K to 8 And I just realize now how much of that information, like how much of that learning, that math conceptual understanding I could have put to use in my own grade 9 classes. And just like you said, I had to put in my time. Like early in my career, I was given a lot of these classes that most teachers aren't too excited to teach because, like you had already said, these are students who are going into these courses that have really disengaged from math based on either their parents telling them that they're not good at math, or I know their elementary teachers didn't tell them they weren't good at math, but their assessment did. The report card, the grade on the report card certainly told them they weren't so great at math. And they weren't exactly the most enjoyable classes to teach. And really what I realized was a lot of it had to do with how I was going about it. And I listening to you, I'm just sort of nodding here, going like, oh yeah,
sure.
that's me. That's definitely me.
For sure. And I was given those classes early on, and the applied level classes, and I was of the same mindset of those teachers as like, I've got to put in my dues with these classes so that eventually I can have the high academic classes. Like I'll be honest, I'm sure I am like most high school math teachers who got into teaching probably because they really liked math, and it was the teaching was something that we could do with our math. And I'll be honest, that's one of the main reasons I got into teaching math, is I really like doing math and showing kids how to do math. But when I got into teaching, it was like how to just do math, not think about math. And so when I'm thinking about those classes, I was teaching those for like 3 or 4 years, and I was pulling my hair out. I remember not enjoying going to school every day. I remember thinking, I don't know if I can do this for my career. I felt like every class like that was rough. Like they were not like the kids that I was ready for or used to. And after 3 years of that, I said to my department head, I said, I don't want to teach these kids anymore. Can you change my class load? I need something different. And after saying that out loud, I realized that I shouldn't have to say that. I shouldn't have to say that in this field. Like that is not the mindset that I should be having. And that was one of my first realizations, that I needed to do something about what I'm doing in the class. Mostly because I hated going to school every day. During that time, it was just not an enjoyable experience.
Right. And for me as well, again, I'm sitting here saying, yeah, that's my story. And oftentimes newer teachers tend to get those courses that, most teachers aren't really looking forward to teaching. And I'll be honest, in those early years, like, how could you blame? Like, I couldn't blame you, Jon, for feeling the way you did, because I had a lot of students coming in, and just like you could feel the negativity in the air. And I mean, I was trying my best. I'm sure you were trying your best based on what I knew, but how, when you think about it, like, you nailed it. Like, we got into this, especially secondary math teachers. I always find, like, for us, we actually have a much greater challenge than our elementary colleagues. And the reason I say that is because as a secondary math teacher, typically what that means is you went through and the traditional system, that traditional classroom worked for us. So we don't know like that same struggle that a lot of these students face in these classes. And it makes it really difficult for us to relate. So whereas my elementary colleagues, some of them went through and they love reading and they love literacy, but maybe they aren't so, fond of math. And I think some of those teachers have a huge advantage because they actually can relate with some of these students who are struggling with some of these ideas in mathematics.
For sure. And, sometimes I wish I had those experiences so that we could relate, especially back then. And like when I had that realization that I had to do something to make this change, otherwise I wasn't going to make it. I started to seek out other teachers that were doing something different. Like I was a teacher that was very traditional, but I also was a teacher that would try stuff. I would, I would be the first teacher that would like, we have these new clickers. that are coming into the system. And do you remember the clickers, Cal?
Ours were CPS.
Yeah.
I don't know if was yours the same type,
CPS,
or I don't know.
exactly,
Is their own name?
CPS. Yeah,
CPS,
and it was like, I'll try those in my class.
Classroom Performance System, I think it
That's
was.
exactly right. And it was like, and it was part of that was like, I have to do something different here. And my first changes were trying to engage my students like that. It was there was a smart board kicking around the school. I was like, I will try that. So I was a trier of things just so that I could do something different in my class. And I would try these technical things. We with some engagement success, but I would say like the first major change with my classroom was when I first saw Marion Small talk about open questions at a workshop, and I thought, this switching of like of the questions around, like covering up answers or covering up questions, numbers and questions, or giving kids answers and asking them to come up with questions, or giving kids questions that had multiple answers to it. Like this was something that I got into quite heavy with my grade 9
Right.
applieds class for sure. Like I bought a set of whiteboards, like little whiteboards that would sit on the desk, and I asked open question after open question, and the engagement level with my kids skyrocketed just there.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Thinking back to my first few years, actually, I didn't go into a little bit of my own details about where I live, and I live in Bell River, as you sort of alluded to, just down the road from Tilbury, where you are, and I taught at the high school in Bell River. Not originally from here, but my wife and I moved out here, and now we have our two beautiful children, Talia and Landon, 6 and 4. But in my first year, you were talking about the technology piece and the smartboard. And for me, my first year teaching, we didn't have any smartboards in the building, but we did have 2 projectors. And you could rent them out or loan them from the library.
Sign them out on the sign-out sheet.
Yeah. So I would go into the library every single morning, and they were in a locker. They had these 2 lockers, and you basically had to go in and take this projector and bring it into your classroom. And the resolution was I couldn't imagine probably like nothing better than a Commodore computer
Right.
type thing. But I took that thing out every day. And then eventually I went to a point where I signed it out for the whole year, which you're not supposed to do, but I just put my name down the entire sheet and took it with me. And, so I feel like, we definitely relate on that level, that like there was something not right for us. And I knew that 30 years of this was not going to cut it for me. So I started kicking around with the technology, and I went pretty deep. I actually ended up getting an iPad cart, one of the first iPad classrooms here in Ontario, through a grant. And I thought that was going to change everything. And it was fun. It was great. Kids loved it. But there was just the math. There was something missing about the math lesson. And you talked about Marion Small. Like for me, that pivotal moment where I decided, or I didn't really decide, to be honest. I sort of, my brain switched for me is when I saw Dan Meyer present, and this idea of a 3-act math task. That's when, like that serious change in my thinking about how I was going to actually teach math. And, not just with, bringing technology in and the CPS units, like you said. This was like foundationally changing how I was thinking about math, and how it rocked my world. And even though I didn't fully understand it, and I'm still working on it, that was something that for me was like the game changer. And I was like, I can do this. And we can do some pretty cool stuff in math. Once I saw that, it was like, boom, gates opened. And I was like, suddenly I was like, there's going to be a way to figure this thing out.
For sure. I have to totally agree to that. And I think you were the first person that pointed me in the direction of Dan Meyer, and showing me some of those videos from way back, and the lessons that went with them. I think I definitely have to thank you for that, because I also felt it was a game changer in what I was doing. I was doing the open questions on the whiteboards, but then when that came in, I'm like, this is going to be, this is, and for sure, I'll be honest, is I looked at it totally as an engagement piece for my students. I can show them this thing, and it's just like, I was so curious to try to answer these questions. I knew that they would, and they were. And Dan, he does a great job of setting up that curiosity. And I know, I think you had a similar experience as when I first started teaching those lessons. I didn't know how to do it. I thought, I have this Act 1 video, and I'm going to play Act 1, and I'm going to say, kids, what kind of math question can we pull from this? This is, I think I said those words, or I would say, like, what makes it, what do you wonder about seeing this video? And then I had to take it from there. It was very clunky in the way that proceeded, and I wasn't sure exactly how to do it early on. And I know that I think you had some similar experiences like that.
Yeah, and it's funny because I think to myself, and I wonder, you and I have had a number of opportunities to chat with Dan, since then, and really most recently, and something I would love to ask him the next time we bump into him is just asking, were we just not hearing the whole message? Like, did we just miss all of these key details, or was he working on it at that time still? Like, was he still trying to wrap his mind around it? I have a funny feeling that he was probably pretty clear, but it was so outside of the scope of what we like could even perceive in our minds, that like we only saw this really interesting video, and we just were like, our brains just shut down from there, and we're like, we're doing that. And I'm sure he was giving all this great guidance on how to do this, but like all I saw was like, got to do that, let's do it tomorrow. And boy, like you and I, having met a number of years ago and collaborating online, we spun our tires for quite some time, with those hit and miss lessons. And I think really at the core of it was just our lack of understanding of, what is necessary in order to like engage students and actually help them understand the math.
Yeah, for sure. And for all of you listening, that's exactly, those questions are exactly why Kyle and I have been on a journey to make math moments that matter for our students. Like, we know that these lessons are sometimes successful and sometimes they're flops. And so we want to understand why there's lessons that are flops and why there's lessons that are so successful. And then for me, for sure, in realizing that, when I started those lessons that were very curious and Dan Meyer style 3-act math lessons, they were so curious, and I was getting that engagement early on, and I know you were getting that engagement early on too. But I feel like what was missing was actual, like, the teaching behind that. Like, how did I go from like showing this curious video clip to having kids want to solve a math problem, but then just turn back to the board and go, this is how you solve the math problem, and I just show them, and then it kind of loses its flavor of being curious anymore. I just turned and did the same thing I was doing anyway, and the kids started to pick up
Right.
on that and therefore they didn't they weren't wondering that much anymore after that first few, because they knew that I was just going to show them how to do the math anyway.
Yeah, and it sounds. I think you got out of the gate maybe on a better foot than I did, because even right at the beginning, it was like I'd show this video, and it was like you could see, like, just in the eyes of the students that they were leaning in, like they were like kind of wondering like what's going on here. But even just in how I would pose the question, I would then say, what question do you think this is
Right.
asking? And like right there, like half the class shuts down. And for the longest time, I just couldn't figure this thing out. And I was wondering why are they
All
shutting
the
down? Like
wonders over.
you could tell they were
Right.
interested. But yeah, there was it was like right now they were like, oh, now now he wants us like something specific. So, I don't want to take a chance on that. And, like I felt the same way. And one of these other pieces that I'm only making sense of in these recent years is that oftentimes, like, I was pre-teaching lessons, and then I would do like a 3-act math task, like at the end of the lesson. And it was like I already sort of answered the problem through the lesson I just
Yeah.
taught. So it sort of sucked that curiosity out before it
Right.
even began. So just so many pieces that impact the success of a lesson, like sometimes right from the start. And you and I over these last couple of years, like we've spent countless hours, and I want to say, let's not even talk hours, let's talk days, weeks, months,
Right.
and years, trying to kind of formulate like what matters here, because like there's something going on. Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't.
Yeah. And there's
So like, John, why don't you share a little bit of what we've sort of landed on
sure.
here, and what we'll talk about over these next couple episodes before we head into some really interesting interviews, as well as some mentoring calls that we have lined up over the next
Yeah.
handful of weeks.
Like you just said that, like what is going into making these, and we call them like what are the math moments that matter, and how can we make math moments that matter? That, there were those lessons that you did and I did, and that we got from Dan, and we started creating our own, and there's lessons that kids were remembering, right? Like they were coming back years later, remembering that lesson, and a thank you to me, or like it's just what I'm trying to say is
Yeah, you're just so
honored that
like,
like I had
there
a
it is.
an impact like that on a kid, that they remembered a lesson, not only like their class. Because when I think back to high school, like I remember my teacher, but I don't remember any specific lesson. But for a kid to come back and say that one lesson was pretty cool, and the fact that they remembered the math about it was even like more amazing. Like how can we make that happen? And what you just said is that we've put together three big things that we need to include in those lessons. And that's just from our experience from going through this for the last few years and building this together. And, one of the first thing, and I think everyone probably would agree to this and know what's coming here, but the first thing is we call it, sparking curiosity. If we can't spark our kids' curiosity to do a math problem, then there's no way that that's going to be memorable for that student. And because you think back to all the times that you remember just normal things, like you're watching TV and you remember a great movie, it's because, maybe it's because there was a little bit mysterious element to it, and it sparked your curiosity to want to know more, and you're hooked into that. We want to do that for our students. Like, how can we spark curiosity regularly with our students, not just a one-off lesson that happens at the end of a unit or at the beginning of a unit, but how can we do this regularly to keep that curiosity going? That's a tough thing, because day in and day out, you're trying to spark these kids' curiosity on a regular basis. So, part one is, how do we do that?
Yeah, and like, and I want to make sure that we don't forget to sort of mention like how long it took us to try to unpack that piece alone, and that's just one of the three parts of the framework. For that, I want to say the better part of 5 years, I was focusing solely on sparking curiosity, and lesson flop after lesson flop after one successful one here and there. It was like trying to unpack like, how can I do that consistently? But then, then came this other issue that once we were like feeling good about sparking curiosity on a regular basis, like we were engaging our students, it was great. Kids were like enjoying the class. They were, disappointed when the bell went, or they, the best compliment you get is when the bell rings and they go, wow, that was fast,
For
in a
sure.
math class, instead of
That's the
like, oh,
best.
thank goodness it's over. Yeah, so that was great, and that's so important. And we don't want to downplay that by any means. That takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of intentional reflection and planning. But what we realized that over time, and I know you experienced this too, is like, so we had these kids that were fully engaged, but what we had noticed is really the only students that had increased their student achievement, meaning like their actual mathematical performance in our classes, were the students who were completely disengaged in the first place. So we were able to like engage them and bring them into the fold, which is great. That's a huge win. But none of the other students, the ones that were, we'll call them compliant maybe, or just, your more studious students that, show up every day, maybe they're, they want to get high marks or whatever their motivation might be. They were doing whatever we told them to do anyway. Like those students, like they didn't, their grades didn't decrease, which is good. But we were kind of like looking like, wow, like we were hoping there would be a payoff for everyone here. And that's when we realized that we were leaving all of the sense making on the table. Like we had poured our hearts and souls into curiosity, which again, don't regret it. But it took us a really long time to realize that, oh my gosh, now that we have their attention, how are we going to help them actually make sense of this math? And when we talk about making sense, we're not talking about, hey, like here's how you do it, follow these steps and you're good to go, because that was how I learned, and that was, really how I got my degree in mathematics, was like through memorization of procedures and algorithms and formulas. And we knew that only some students in our classroom are able to do that form of like memorization, whereas like there was always going to be some kids left behind because they just needed to understand like why we're doing what we're doing. And in math class of all places, there's always a reason why. But the sad reality was that, guys like you and I, John, just didn't know why certain things worked. And we just had a lot of work to do there. So we call that the fueling of sense making. And that's that second part of the framework.
For sure. Like thinking about like all of that, like why are we sparking curiosity to begin with if we can't change how they're learning the math so that it's more memorable to them? And not memorization is what I'm talking about, but memorizing those moments that, they can remember later in the math that goes with them. So fueling sense making, a huge piece of our framework. And like you said, we think for a few years there, when we were starting this engagement journey, we were missing that. We were getting engagement with sparking curiosity, but then leaving that whole sense making piece behind, and just turning back and delivering a standard kind of lesson, not helping them make sense of the math any more than what we had done in the past.
Right. And then that leads us to our last piece. I'd like to say, if you've got sparking curiosity and fueling sense making down, like those are two big heavy hitters. But then the real difficult part is now thinking about the big picture, right? And that's where this third part of the framework comes in. And this is what we call igniting your next moves. And really, when we say next moves, we mean like teacher moves. And there's so much that goes, and like so much planning and reflection and intentionality that goes into planning these lessons, that, we want to try to make connections from like one lesson to the next. And we want to make sure that we're not just connecting from one lesson to the next in the same topic or concept or chapter, but that we can actually like show that mathematics is like pretty interconnected. So we've got to do these moves, like moves before the lesson, like thinking about kids, what they're bringing with them, moves during the lesson. Like, what are we doing as kids are like solving problems?
And that's a huge
class. And then where do we go next?
Yeah, that's like the moves during the lesson are pretty huge. Like what, I think we take it for granted when we were in teachers college, or teacher education programs. We had to think about those a lot. And I remember writing a lot of stuff down about what I was going to say, what I was going to do. And then as we get more comfortable in our teaching, we lose some of that. We're like, we're going to go in. I can't remember the last time I wrote a lesson plan to say what I was going to say, because you feel like you can go in and just, I don't want to say wing it, because you've got a lot of experience behind you, but that's what we're doing. We're going in and we're not carefully thinking about the questions we ask our students, and how we ask those questions. It also means like, how do we structure our classroom to get the most thinking out? like we said before, like most of my lessons before were structured around me thinking and them just listening and regurgitating later. But what are we doing? What are our moves that we're making? How can we set up our classroom so that we can get them to think more than us thinking? So
Right, right.
that's igniting next moves. It's a big piece, and it's not a third piece. It's not like in order. Even though sparking curiosity kind of comes first before we can fuel sense making with our students, but then it's not like igniting your next moves comes after that. That's not the case. It's just the third thing we have to think about. And in reality, it kind of comes first. We definitely have to think about.
I was just going to say that, like, to think of how you're going to spark curiosity, you've got to think that's like a before
Right.
move, right? Like, what are we going to do? Like, what's the learning goal today? And what am I going to do? What context makes sense for me to sort of work with to try to draw them in so that I can do some teaching after they've done some
Right.
problem
And
solving?
these three things are huge. You know, they're what we've been thinking about for years, trying to perfect, and we're not there yet. We're trying to get there, and we wanna help you do that too. We want you on this journey with us. So that's what this podcast is going to be about. It's going to be about how can we do these things in our classrooms. How can we spark that curiosity on a regular basis? What are the moves that we can do for next moves, and how are we feeling that sense making? We wanna help you as much, because if we can help you, we're helping more students, and that's one of our biggest things. If we can help more students, then we're changing the way math is viewed in the world. Um, and that's
Yeah.
a big goal of ours, is to help change the way math is viewed, for sure.
Well, and let's be honest, John, like I agree. Like, yeah, we definitely want to try to, touch as many students mathematically as possible. But in reality too, like I want to say, like, being the selfish guys that we are, like we are getting the most benefit out of doing this podcast, because I just think about, the conversations that you and I have had to try to organize our thinking about our own lesson planning, like our own teaching. We like are going to benefit the most from this process. So like we're so excited to be able to have this opportunity to, reflect on our own practice, but also share, and also really give you folks, the people listening, the opportunity to connect with us too, because these first few episodes, although it's going to be you and me going back and forth about some of these big epiphanies that we've had, and our 3-part framework, and really trying to help people better understand what that looks like or sounds like in their own class. But we have some big interviews coming up with some big names in the math space, and we also have some episodes with math educators who have a challenge, or just like it could just be a question that we're going to try to work through together, like try to build on the collective expertise of the three of us. So you, John, myself, and then the guest who comes on, and really just try to wrestle through an idea in a mentorship role. Not that you and I will have an answer for them, but rather to just kind of throw these ideas out there, and really we're hoping the people at home are going to be thinking about these things as well, and sharing them back with us through the blog, which we'll be sharing shortly, or through reviews on iTunes, and really just trying to build this community so that we can all work together to try to better our practice and just
You
continue
are right,
learning.
and I'm so excited for this, because we got these great episodes coming up. We can't wait for you to hear them. So in order to ensure you don't miss out on these new episodes, and as they come out each week, we're going to be putting one a week out. Be sure to subscribe on iTunes or Google Play or Stitcher, whatever podcast platform you use. Also, if you're liking what you're hearing, please share the podcast with a colleague and help us reach a wider audience by leaving us a review on iTunes. The show notes and links to resources from the episode, which means we're going to put some links to what we've been talking about, to the website, we have a 4-part video series we want to share with you too. You can find all those on makemathmoments.com/episode1. That's makemathmoments.com/episode and the number 1.
Awesome. Awesome. So we're going to make sure, like, you got to come back for episode 2. We're going to be diving deeper into the framework. And in this next episode, we're actually going to go to our number one go-to tool for sparking curiosity. Again, like Jon, you had mentioned earlier, these are big, big, big pieces of this framework. So we're only going to be sharing like one tool in this next episode for sparking curiosity, something we call the curiosity path. But like Jon already alluded to, if you're not interested in waiting until then, like you just can't wait and you want to dive in real deep, we do have that 4-part video series available to you. It is up and it will stay up. Initially, it came down for just a short while, and we had so many people asking about it to get it back up so they could share it with their colleagues and work on it during PLCs. So what this 4-part series is about building resilient problem solvers who don't want to stop learning math when the bell rings. You can get that free 4-part lesson series at makemathmoments.com/lesson 1. Again, makemathmoments.com/lesson 1. So until next time, I'm Kyle Pearce.
And I'm Jon Orr.
High fives for us.
And high fives for you.